Actually, since I finally was able to, I was in Paris, and it was one of those moments. At some point, you have to move on, and trying to do that and it being really difficult.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
Janet Jackson just dropped a bombshell. Michael made her help him fake his passing. For years, she's been holding back this painful truth about her famous brother. Now, at 58, she's ready to reveal what happened during Michael's darkest days. What was so urgent that he pulled his sister into his plan? Let us take you into the Jackson family's hidden world that no one ever knew about before today. Childhood in the shadows. Michael Jackson was born in 1958 in Gary, Indiana, a small working-class town. He was one of 10 siblings living in a modest two-bedroom house, a place that was always filled with music, but not much space. From day one, he was surrounded by melodies. His mother played the clarinet and piano while dreaming of being a country star. His father, Joe, wasn't exactly the warm and fuzzy type. He was a boxer, a crane operator, and the driving force behind the Jackson 5. But, as his sister is now revealing, Joe wasn't just pushing them to stardom. There were darker moments too. It wasn't all catchy tunes and talent shows. The Jacksons' rise to fame had a cost, and it wasn't just about long rehearsals or missed childhoods. Before we delve into this, it's clear that the truth behind the Jackson family's rise is far darker than anyone could have imagined, and this won't be the only revelation that will shock you. Gary, Indiana might seem like an ordinary place, but it was the birthplace of the Jackson family's struggles and triumphs. Privacy didn't exist in their crowded home, but that lack of space created a bond among the siblings that no one could break. Growing up in a tight-knit African-American community influenced him deeply. Music was always in the air. Gospel, blues, rhythm, and blues. All of it seeped into his bones. But as his sister has now admitted, it wasn't just music that shaped her brother's future. It was also the harsh discipline from their father and the pressure to be perfect that left scars they both carried for life. The Jacksons became famous thanks to their father's relentless drive. By 1963, they were hitting local talent shows, aiming for something bigger. But he, who was just a little kid, was thrown into the adult world way too soon. He didn't have a childhood. He had nightclubs and late-night rehearsals. His sister says that the family put on a good front, but there was no denying that he lost out on the simple joys most kids take for granted. Behind all the glitz and glamour was a boy who never got to be just that. A boy. Fast forward a few years, and the Jackson 5 were superstars. They were everywhere, from small shows to signing with major record labels. But while the public saw the talented brothers dancing and smiling, his sister saw her brother fading away. Sure, they had hits like I Want You Back and ABC, but they also had sleepless nights, pressure to perform, and a father who never stopped pushing. She has now confessed that the fame wasn't what it seemed. The Jackson family might have looked like they had it all, but behind the scenes, the cracks were forming. As he grew older, the cracks only widened. His sister's recent revelations paint a different picture of what was happening as he rose to be the king of pop. He might have had the hits, the albums, and the moonwalk, but he also had demons. Demons that she says he never truly escaped. She shared that the stress of their upbringing and the spotlight led him down a path where he felt the need to fake it. He was trying to keep up appearances for the world while battling fears and insecurities behind closed doors. Fame had its perks, but it also demanded sacrifices, and he paid dearly. She talks about how his success grew with albums like Off the Wall and Thriller. Those albums made him a superstar, but they also put him in a cage made of expectations and relentless scrutiny. He was never satisfied, always chasing something more, and his need for perfection became an obsession. She says that even with all the money, awards, and fans, her brother was haunted by the feeling that he had to pretend, to put on a show for everyone else. The real him, the one who wanted to be free, was hidden away. As the Jackson family rose to fame, troubles were growing behind the scenes. Struggles behind the music. But it wasn't just the pressure of performing that weighed him down. The Jackson family had its fair share of internal struggles too. She says their father's discipline went beyond what people knew. Joe Jackson might have been the reason for their success, but his methods were harsh, and the scars from those days stayed with him until the end. For her, watching her brother go through this was heartbreaking. The man who had once lit up the stage now seemed like a shell of himself, still pretending for the world that everything was okay. Her recent revelations don't just stop at their father's discipline. She talks about the heartbreak of seeing him try to escape his pain. The world knows about his addiction to painkillers, but she says it was deeper than that. He was battling the ghosts of his past, and the substances were just a way to numb the memories of a life that had never truly been his own. He was 50 when he died, but she says he had been carrying the weight of his struggles since he was just a kid, trying to cope with a life that was never as glamorous as it appeared. She also dives into the complexity of his relationships. He married Lisa Marie Presley in the 90s, and it seemed like a fairy tale. But she says the marriage was anything but that. The pressure from the media, the scrutiny from everyone around them, it took a toll. Lisa Marie tried to be there for him, but she reveals that he never really let anyone in. He was always faking it, trying to keep up the facade of the king of pop, even when everything was falling apart behind closed doors. His second marriage to Debbie Rowe was no different. She says it was clear that he wanted a family, but his battles with addiction and fame made it impossible for him to truly find happiness. Their children, Prince and Paris, brought him joy, but the stress of trying to be the father he never had while also living up to his own image was overwhelming. She reveals that he was constantly on edge, always fearful of losing what little happiness he had managed to find. And then, of course, there were the allegations. She says that those were the hardest times for him. The accusations of abuse and the constant scrutiny from the public broke him in ways that he never recovered from. She admits that her brother wasn't perfect, but she also says that the media turned him into a monster, exaggerating every mistake and making it impossible for him to move forward. He might have had his flaws, but he wasn't the villain they painted him to be. She says that during those dark times, he leaned on her more than ever. She was his confidant, the one person he trusted when everyone else seemed to be against him. But even she couldn't pull him out of the darkness. She recalls how he would often tell her he felt like he was just going through the motions, pretending to be the superstar everyone expected him to be, while feeling completely empty inside. The man the world knew as an icon was, in her eyes, just her broken, big brother. In the end, his death in 2009 wasn't just the loss of a pop legend. It was the culmination of years of pain, pressure, and pretending. She says that watching her brother in those final days was one of the hardest things she's ever experienced. He was exhausted, fighting to keep up with the demands of fame while struggling with his health. She reveals that he had been trying to get help, but it was too little, too late. The substances that were supposed to help him, sleep, ended up taking everything away. Michael's sister has kept his memory alive in her own way, performing tributes, releasing music, and sharing the good times they had together. But she says it's impossible to ignore the reality of what happened. The man who moonwalked his way into history was also a man who was hurting, who never got the chance to live his life the way he wanted. Her story is a reminder that behind every superstar, there's a real person with real pain. Fame lifted him high, but it also trapped him, leaving him to fight against both the world and his own fears. The pressure of being Michael. The recent confession about her brother's last days sheds new light on the tragedy of Michael's life. The truth is, he spent much of his life pretending. He pretended to be okay when he wasn't, he pretended to be happy when he wasn't, and he pretended to be the king of pop when all he wanted was to be himself. Join us as we dive deeper into the untold story of a pop icon who, despite the glitz and glamour, was just trying to survive in a world that demanded everything from him. What really went on behind closed doors, and why did he feel like he had to fake it all? His rise to fame began at such a young age that he never had the chance to understand what was happening to him. The world watched as he transformed from a bright-eyed kid in the Jackson 5 to a global phenomenon. But what the public didn't see were the late nights spent in rehearsals, the relentless pressure from his father, and the haunting fear that he was never good enough. His sister shares that he always felt like he was chasing something that he could never quite reach. The perfection that Joe demanded from his children left him with an insatiable need to prove himself, even when there was nothing left to prove. He was constantly trying to outdo himself, to show the world that he was worthy of the love and adoration they gave him. She remembers the early years when the Jackson 5 was just beginning to make a name for themselves. They would perform at local clubs, often staying out late into the night, surrounded by adults who were oblivious to the fact that they were just kids. He, the youngest of the group, was exposed to things that no child should ever have to see. She reveals that her brother was often scared, confused, and overwhelmed by the adult world that he was thrown into. He would look to her for comfort, but even she, as his younger sister, couldn't fully understand the weight he was carrying. As the Jackson 5 gained popularity, the expectations grew. They signed with major record labels, released hit after hit, and became household names. But his sister says that with every success came more pressure. Joe was relentless, pushing them to rehearse for hours on end, never allowing them to rest or take a break. He, who was naturally gifted, was always the center of attention, and Joe made sure that he stayed that way. She describes how her brother would often cry himself to sleep, exhausted from the constant rehearsals and the burden of having to be the best. He was just a child, but the world demanded that he be more than that. Being the star of the group, he bore the brunt of Joe's anger. He was never allowed to make a mistake, never allowed to be anything less than perfect. His sister says that these experiences left her brother with deep emotional scars. He grew up believing that he had to be perfect, that any flaw or mistake would mean that he was worthless. This need for perfection followed him throughout his life, affecting everything he did. When he decided to pursue a solo career, she says that he saw it as a chance to finally be free from his father's control. He wanted to create music that was his own, to express himself in a way that he never could as part of the Jackson 5. But even as he achieved success as a solo artist, the pressure never went away. His first solo album, Off the Wall, was a huge hit, but it wasn't enough for him. His sister reveals that her brother was always looking for the next big thing, the next challenge. He wanted to be the best, not just in his family, but in the world. And for a while, he was. Thriller became the best-selling album of all time, and he became a global icon. Fame brought him everything he ever wanted, and took even more, as he struggled with loneliness that few people, even his family, really understood. The man behind the music. She also talks about the loneliness that came with his fame. He had millions of fans around the world, but very few people that he could truly call friends. He was always surrounded by people, but his sister says that her brother often felt completely alone. The people around him wanted something from him: money, fame, a piece of his success. She remembers how he would confide in her, telling her that he didn't know who to trust. He wanted to believe that people loved him for who he was, but he always feared that they only loved the idea of him, the king of pop, not the man behind the persona. A name known across the globe, he faced immense pressures from the world. His sister Janet tells us that the stress from countless accusations led him to increasingly depend on painkillers. It wasn't just physical pain from years of performing that bothered him, but also emotional pain from the burdens he carried. Substances became his escape, a way to dull the sharp edges of the pain that overwhelmed him daily. Janet shares that she tried many times to help her brother. She wanted him to break free from the grip of substances, but his addiction had taken hold too firmly. He was caught in a dangerous cycle, one that seemed impossible to escape. Janet felt helpless, watching him sink deeper into his struggles without a way to pull him back. His life is often viewed through the lens of his incredible talent and the fame that came with it. But Janet wants the world to see another side of him, the personal side. She describes him as a gentle soul, someone who sought nothing more than to be loved and accepted for who he was. Yet the world demanded far too much from him. He gave his all, his very essence, until he had nothing left to give. Today, Janet is committed to keeping Michael's memory alive. She aims to remind people of the man behind the music. Her brother, she says, was not just a pop icon, but a kind, caring individual with deep flaws. Through sharing his story, she hopes to highlight the human aspects of Michael's life, showing that he was more than his public persona. Fame often looks glamorous from the outside. The glitter, the praise from fans worldwide, it all seems like a dream. However, Janet points out the heavy price of such a life. For Michael, it cost him his childhood, his peace, and eventually, his life. She hopes that by telling Michael's story, others will understand the heavy toll of fame and see that behind every superstar is a real person, struggling and striving just like anyone else. Janet's narrative serves as a stark reminder of the not-so-shiny parts of fame. She wants people to know that Michael dealt with issues that are rarely seen by the public. He battled loneliness, anxiety, and a never-ending stream of criticism that no amount of money or fame could shield him from. Her reflections bring to light the intense scrutiny that Michael faced throughout his career. Every move and decision were watched and often judged harshly. The constant pressure was exhausting and isolating for him. Despite his superstar status, Michael felt trapped by his fame, unable to live a normal life. Janet's insight into Michael's life also delves into the relationships within their famous family. She talks about the complexities of growing up Jackson, with all eyes on them from a young age. Despite the challenges, she remembers Michael's deep love for his family and his constant efforts to protect and provide for them. She also touches on Michael's creative genius. Janet believes that his music was one of his few escapes from the harsh realities of his life. Through his songs, he expressed his deepest emotions and momentarily freed himself from his troubles. His music, she suggests, was not just entertainment, but a diary of his personal path. Moreover, Janet discusses the impact of Michael's philanthropic efforts. Despite his own struggles, he always looked to help others, especially children. He used his fame to shine a light on issues like poverty and disease, hoping to make a difference in the world. Janet sees this as a testament to his character, an aspect of Michael that often goes unnoticed. As we reflect on Michael Jackson's life through Janet's eyes, we see a complex picture of a man who was thrust into the spotlight at a young age and never truly escaped it. His life was a mix of extraordinary talent, unimaginable pressures, and the simple human desire to be understood and loved. Is Janet's story just the tip of a deeper family drama? Or is there more to the Jacksons' hidden things? Tell us what you think, and remember to like and subscribe for more.